Oh, crap. Nine, four, 642, verify. Yeah, no, it wasn't, his hours are slightly off. I had to break it to him. Okay. Nothing like having the website down for about 18 hours yesterday. So if your paper doesn't get sent in till today, it's okay. I won't count it, all right? Y'all gotta give me an extra day, okay? And my phone was blowing up. The only thing I could get were emails on my phone. So if you sent me a course message, couldn't do it. I didn't have a whole lot to do with that. It was like great. So good morning, everybody. Wow, is it already? We got a few minutes here. Give me just a second. Going to class. And then the IT person said, oh, it was only down for an hour on Saturday, and it was just a minor amount of time yesterday. And I'm like, oh, really? Because I tried to log in so I could grade all, put grades on all the peer revision stuff. I couldn't get to anything. I'm very aware it didn't go back up till about 8 o'clock last night. So it's frustrating. Yeah, it might have worked in Levelland on the campus, but it wasn't working anywhere else. So don't panic. If you didn't get your paper in, get it in today. I'm not going to count them late. And Lorenzo, I'll be out to see you guys on Friday. I know you're thrilled. I did Health Center last Friday. It was interesting. I had to go through the band hall to get into the building. That was really interesting. Because that's where my GPS, I just use the Google Maps or the Maps app on my phone. And it always takes me where I want to go. It doesn't, except I was on the back side. So I had kids let me in through the band hall. I was like, okay, it's cool. Okay. So, all right. Okay. All right, let me make a note here. Today is, what the heck is, okay. I've lost total thoughts on what has anything to do with the dates of the month. Sheesh. I want to look at the whole month. There we go. Good morning, Jessie.
Good morning.
Let's see. So we're just missing Claire. All right. She should be here. So you've got a whole smash of papers in front of you. That's everything you can get a handout on for compare and contrast. And they're all nicely separated, so I was trying to help you out because it's just, are you cold? Or did you lose an arm over the weekend? Okay, that's all. Well, see, I looked down, it said 67 on the weather, so I was like, oh, I need to not be outside and without something, so then I got hot in the car. Because they can't seem to have enough staff at the Sonic that I go to all the time. Have y'all run into that?
Everywhere short staff.
Everywhere, and it's a shame. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about compare and contrast, and you know, this is a skill that we use all the time. You may not think of it, but do you ever sit around with your friends and say, let's go to a movie? And then you have to figure out what movie you're going to go to, right? So you're sitting there and somebody brings up one and somebody brings up another, and then you start comparing and contrasting the advantages of going. You do it all the time, right? It's kind of surprising. It's even when you're sitting in front of the TV with someone. What do you want to watch? I don't know. What do you want to watch? We do it a lot. Where do you want to go eat? I do that with my husband. He only has about 3 places he likes to go eat. So for some reason, he's a George's fan. There's nothing wrong with George's. You know, you can get, we call it good old small town, like food at a restaurant, chicken fried steak, fried catfish on a Friday night. Yeah, that's what he had Friday night. We had a big meal out at Leveland that was through the cafeteria out there, so I'm fine for it. Okay, so let's look at, the very first thing, there's a handout. See, I don't even have a copy for myself. Let me open up one, and we'll just start with that one. It's the one that says comparison and contrast. I'm got to blow it up, and it looks like a Word document that I created. How about that? That pretty much covers it, okay? It's going to be the one in the middle for you, all right? It looks like a Word document. Looks like this. This is me summarizing basically the textbook. So if you didn't read it, okay. Don't panic. Oh, got some sinus issues going. I mean, 4 things. You could have problems this morning, Jason. Okay. All right, so what is it? Comparison and contrast shows how 2 or more things are alike, are similar, or different. But guess what? You cannot use the words similarities and differences when you write this paper for me. I don't like that. I frown on it. Somebody will do it, probably more than one, all right, but they'll get done. But basically, it's an analogy, and it's a special form of comparison which explains one thing by comparing it to a second, more familiar thing. One of the ways for humans to make sense of our world is to compare and contrast. Well, which car do you want? Well, I want a Mustang. Well, I want what's comparable to a Mustang? Charger? Do they even make Chargers anymore? Okay. Kind of the same? Or would it be a Camaro from Chevy? Do they still make Camaros? See, I don't even know. So you're looking at a sports car, and guess what? A Mustang is more expensive to insure than a Corvette, because the average age of a Mustang driver is going to be 17, 18, 19, whereas a Corvette's going to be that sad little 60-year-old man or 50-year-old man or 45-year-old man trying to recover his youth, okay? So, it's those things we do. Because comparison and contrast are central to our understanding of the world, it's often used in essays and for exams because of that. What you're in history, you might be asked to compare and contrast what were the causes for war in World War I and World War II, and you're going to see that there's some similarities, but there's some differences. Okay. When you read questions on exams, certain key words will tell you that that's what they're doing. It'll say compare and contrast or similarities and differences. It might use the term relative merits, advantages, and disadvantages, okay? Even when the assignment does not state one of the words or phrases, the purpose of the assignment may indicate that pattern of development. So when you evaluate, you frequently use C and C, which is a lot easier to write than compare and write all that out. So you could compare courses, you compare instructors. Think about it. Once you get into college and you start by, who do you want to take from? Well, what do they say on this website about this one? What do they say about that instructor? Have y'all done that yet? Or do you listen to your advisor who says to go and take from? I'm aware of what my ranking is out there, but I don't worry about it. It's not anything. It's not going to change my life. Let me just phrase it that way. So a basis for comparison must exist when you're comparing and contrasting. The 2 or more things must have something in common. So I can't compare an orange and a washing machine. What do they have in common? They're concrete. No, they're not abstract concepts. They are concrete things. You can touch them. So I couldn't write a comparison and contrast paper over an orange and a washing machine, it wouldn't make sense. But if I wanted to compare an orange and an apple, I could do that. They're both fruits. Now I've got a few more things going on. They're basic vitamin makeup, things like that. But we're not gonna get to do fruits, we're not gonna compare fruits and vegetables. That's kind of an elementary one, even though my topic list does have that on it. You really gotta stay away from the ones. We can't compare red and black, or green and white, you know. The list was pretty comprehensive, so. When two subjects are similar, the differences may be what's worth writing about, though, and when they are not very much alike, then you want to look for the similarities. So points for discussion. After deciding what subjects to compare and contrast, you need to select the points you want to discuss. You do this by determining the focus. Am I going to look at similarities? Am I going to look at differences? Or am I going to look at, you're going to have to look at a lot of times, the compare and contrast will have to be through the characteristics that seem to be most important. When you're buying a car, do you really need to talk about the tires on the car? Probably not, because most cars have tires, right? But you might need to talk about what is the interior? Does it have, what type of interior? Is it leather seats? You know what I'm saying? So the interior features, you might want to talk about the electronic internet kind of things that come with it. You might even want to talk about the cost of insurance on a car, because the type of car, like I said, a Mustang's going to cost more to insure, you know, because of who drives it. You know, and sorry to say, 16 to 25-year-old males, you get a bum deal as drivers of cars, okay? You are the ones that cost the most, okay? So, developing a thesis statement. So, your thesis statement in a compare and contrast essay, let me make it a little bit bigger here, needs to tell the reader exactly what the subjects you're going to analyze and the criteria or how you're going to evaluate the two subjects. All right? And that's what that whole long paragraph says. And I said it in, about 5 words? Well, when you're publishing a textbook, you got to put a lot of words in there. All right. And so, subject by subject, there are 2 main methods to use. The first one is called the block method. And so, the block method is where you treat one subject and all the criteria in the same paragraph. All right? So, the introduction might be, and I'm going to do Star Wars and Star Trek. Sorry if you're not a sci-fi fan. It just was easy for me to do. And guess what? One of the topics is on the topic list, Star Wars and Star Trek. So, and I didn't create the topic list. But if you look at it, many people think Star Wars and Star Trek are the same story. They happen in outer space, right? It's all the same. But comparing and contrasting the two series shows how both have different views of the future and the past. So, here's how I could organize it. In the block method, I would talk about Star Wars, and because if I look back up in the thesis statement, it says Star Wars first. And then it says Star Trek, so that's the order. Remember, once you give an order, you have to follow it. There are no exceptions to the rule. So, we're going to look at setting, characters, and conflict. And then for Star Trek, we'll look at, so first paragraph ends with that introduction. Second paragraph talks about Star Wars and goes through setting, characters, and conflict. And Star Trek, setting, characters, and conflict. And the conclusion is, well, how they have different views of the future, or the past, whichever it is, okay? So point by point is a little bit different. Point by point is the meta method to use if you're doing an exam and you're sitting in a classroom and you have 50 minutes to take a midterm exam. You can't spend all 50 minutes writing about one. You know, with that previous one, you could talk a lot about the characters, the setting, and the conflict. You could spend a lot of time talking about that. Whereas if you do alternating, it's a little bit better, because in alternating, you're going to do something a little bit different. But see how it's I just came up with a different thesis statement. It would work for either one. Although Star Trek and Star Wars are both series about humankind and its expansion into outer space, the settings, the characters, and the conflicts show the greater complexity of the Star Wars universe. I am talking about the original Star Trek that was on TV. So, and instead of focusing on the subjects, alternating or point by point, focus on the characteristics. So my second paragraph is going to talk about the setting, and then I would talk about Star Trek and Star Wars. Third paragraph would talk about the characters, and then I talk about Star Trek characters, Star Wars characters. Fourth paragraph talks about the conflicts, Star Trek conflicts, and then Star Wars conflicts, and then the same basic conclusion, okay? And that's that paper, okay? So that's just a quick down and dirty about block and alternating. Let's see. Let's look at let's do the PowerPoint. You can tell the PowerPoint because it has the indents. It looks like it's got, it's going to be that one No, right there, that's the PowerPoint. Wait, because I do outline version, would you hold it up so they can see what it looks like? See how it looks, that one, that's the PowerPoint. Because I do outline because it doesn't print on, 18 slides on 18 pages. All right. So, writing the comparison and contrast essay. This is a little different kind of visual. It's gonna be almost the exact same information, but it's a little bit different view of it. So what is the purpose? It draws out the differences between the two subjects, or it brings out the similarities. It demonstrates, possibly, you do not have to, but it demonstrates how one subject may be superior to the other. If I'm gonna compare the iPhone 13 and what's the new one about the flip fold and the new Android thing that can do all those foldings and things? You know the one I'm talking about? The Galaxy, whatever. Yeah, I could compare and contrast two cell phones. See how you can do that. So, and it demonstrates how two subjects with superior to similar are actually similar. You're going to be working off with things that are basically similar, most of you. So instead of judgmental, it could just be informational. You don't have to say that one product is better than the other. It may be up to an individual choice. You can tell me everything you want to about the difference between a Mustang and a Camaro, but I'm still going to buy the Mustang because that's what I want. You know what I'm saying? So you could just provide information. So how do you prepare? First off, you've got to brainstorm everything you know about the two subjects. What do you know about what you're going to do? And we're going to do a little bit of that, I think, this week. Let me check my syllabus. Let's see. That's what we might do on Wednesday. We might work with the textbook too. We'll see. So if you need access to your textbook, possibly on Wednesday, okay? Brainstorm everything about the 2 points. Identify the points that are relevant to both the subjects. Establish a dominant idea after examining those points of similarity and difference, and that's the basis. I'm trying to find a piece of blank paper that hasn't been written on. So, one of the easiest ways to set up your comparison and contrast, and we all love them, it's called a Venn diagram, if my pencil will work. No, that one doesn't work. Of course I grab one that doesn't. Okay, so the Venn diagram where you have the two circles, come on, I know you were taught this in classes in high school, because it's the easy one to teach the graphic organizers. And so let's just go Mustang, Camaro. Okay, so we talk about, all right, what do they have in common? They have an engine, they have wheels. Oh, you can't read my handwriting. I should draw a picture, it might be better. Wheels, what else do they have that you need to worry about? That's what they have in common, right? The basic setup. So what do they have different? It would be the outside look is different. So if you like, I don't even know what they look like. I mean, a Mustang. I can recognize the Mustang, but I couldn't tell you a Camaro from something else. I don't think they do that much with them anymore. See, so what we're running into is that there's actually, let's talk about cost. Ooh, when you're doing a compare and contrast, cost becomes important. So that's what the purpose of the Venn diagram. So here, they've got this. You don't really want to talk about the engine, the wheels, or the basic setup of the car. It might be more important to talk about the outside look, the cost, and insurance. That's where it's the differences that you need to look at for the differences between these two cars, okay? So just by doing something as simple as Venn diagram. And one of your things, you have a big PDF there from another university that I found that I really liked, that they have a Venn diagram if you need to try that and help you. So select the traits to focus upon based upon the dominant idea. So if I were going to write this paper, I would say it is important to consider the outside appearance, the insurance needed, and the cost of the car when deciding between a Mustang and a Camaro. That's how I would set up my thesis statement, by looking at the differences. Okay? So, select those traits and then focus on them. And be sure the traits are subject to the purpose, which is your desired thing. Which car is going to be better for me than the other? All right, so writing the thesis statement. How do you write it? You decide to what extent you're going to focus, and I've already told you, I'm going to be doing, if I do those two cars, I'm going to do the differences. But I don't have to say differences. You create a thesis statement that reflects it. But you have to think about your product, whatever you're going to do, You have to think about it. If I were to compare Six Flags to Disney World, I could do that. That's a paper, isn't it? You have to have been to both places. You're writing about amusement parks, but what are the differences? Well, there are no bugs at Disney World, right? I don't know, there may be. There weren't when I went, okay? All right, so here's some weak thesis statements. They are both somewhat alike and somewhat different. So when you go to write your thesis statement for your compare and contrast essay, please make a note that these are weak ones. Don't use them. So on your, on your document, you can write, no, don't do it, okay? Made me think I might be able to write on this PowerPoint, but then again, maybe not. Thought I'd grab my pen, and we'll see. So that's a weak one, but that's one that you probably have seen somewhere at some point in time. Oh, I can write on it. So these are no's. See, I'm going to make a big red X. Okay. So we'll go to I can see some similarities and some differences too. That's a bad one, because it just leaves your reader has no clue what you're going to be doing. And both of them involve only a single similarity and no differences or whatever. So those are weak ones. So here's a strong one, or a couple of strong ones. Ralph and Jack have very different leadership styles and motivations, which leads to the eventual chaos and anarchy on the island. This is the one about Lord of the Flies. Anybody have to read that in high school? It's about the boys in World War II. They're on a ship and they shipwreck on the island and they turn into little cannibals and killers. It's like an early version of Hunger Games, except there's nobody watching them, okay? But so we're going to look at the subjects are Ralph and Jack, and we're going to look at them through their leadership styles and their motivations, but we're going to see how that leads to chaos and anarchy on the island, which is basically like Animal Farm, too. There's a lot of those stories out there, kind of scary. Or in order, I like this one, so put a star next to this one. This is one if you're going to compare two things that you can use. In order to make a decision between the Honda Civic and the BMW, consider the following criteria: price of the vehicle, average mileage, and price of insurance. And when they're talking average mileage, they mean miles per gallon, which is an important consideration right now. I was getting a ride home from the guy that was working on my car. They've been working on our cars for 40 years or more. And he stopped to fill up at the Walmart, and he had a big old pickup truck, and he was spending like $75 to fill up his truck. And I'm like, if I spend $25, that's expensive for me in my little economy car. So, yeah. So when you're talking about average mileage, that's miles per gallon. So, but look at that. Those were two of the criteria I had: cost and insurance. So the price of the vehicle and the price of insurance. So now you get organizing it. So they're going to talk, should you use block or should you use alternating? So block treats all of the elements for each subject separately. You do them, in other words, you do all of the information about the Honda Civic in one paragraph, and then the next paragraph you do everything about the BMW. But you have to look at cost, mileage, and insurance, okay? Or alternating treats each element with respect to each subject sequentially. That sounds complicated, doesn't it? But what it says is you look at the original cost of the car, then in one paragraph, and you talk about the Honda, and then the BMW. Then you talk about the average mileage, you talk about the Honda and the BMW. See how I'm always doing the same order? And then you talk about insurance and the Honda and the BMW, which is going to be exactly the opposite of what they do in this later on. If the comparison is short, a paragraph or two, the block method is okay. And that's perfectly acceptable for you to use the block method on this. The alternating is better for a longer comparison. There's a risk that a block essay will sound like two separate essays. You have to be, and they're weakly connected, so you have to watch out for that. All right, so now you're going to see you have come on, there we go. You have a graphic organizer on here, but it's not this image, but it's a copy of it, because this is one of the things you can use to help you figure out your essay. It's the single sheet that has the table. I created that table by myself. Let me tell you, it probably took me 2 hours because I'm not the greatest. So here they're showing it block organization. And so you're going to see that this should say subjects right up here. Subjects. The subjects are the two items that you're comparing and contrasting, whatever they are. You can do it with boyfriends, okay? You do it with books that you want to read, movies you want to see. All right, so the BMW flows this way. So you're going to have the topic sentence will say something. A BMW is a great car for a person to consider purchasing. That would be the topic sentence of the second paragraph. And then I would start saying, the average cost of a BMW is however much. So you start talking about this in the second sentence. And you might take second sentence and second and third sentences, okay? Mileage, then you're gonna have to transition and say, another important consideration when looking at a car is the average, is how many miles per gallon you get on a tank of gas. I'm still in the same paragraph. So sentences, that would be your fourth, would be your transition sentence, 5 and 6, because you have to talk about in-town mileage, right? And then on the highway, because they're not the same. So 5 and 6, then we're gonna transition in sentence 7 to insurance, and 8 and 9 talk about that. So then I've got, look what you have. You have a 9 to 10 sentence paragraph, don't you? So this is second paragraph. Third paragraph is, let me do that. Then we're gonna do the same thing. First sentence is gonna be, another option for a person to buy would be a Honda Civic, okay? So that's the first sentence. Second sentence is gonna talk about the price, second and third about the price. It's gonna be exactly the same, isn't it? But it flows this way, okay? And so we're looking at 2, 8 to 9 to 10 sentences, you know, depending on your criteria, and then you have a conclusion, and then you've got an essay, right? So that's the block method. I do such a great job of drawing. All right, let's move on. So now, let's talk about the differences. Here's how the outline looks if you were to do an outline. You have an introduction, which has a hook background. So this is paragraph 1. Oh, great. There's going to be font stuff appearing, right? The second paragraph, so this is paragraph 2, talks about the BMW, goes through, it's just a different visual. It's a different organization, graphic organizer, okay? Then you've got the Honda Civic. That's going to be paragraph 3. Whoops. And notice how it always goes. Look at how everything flows in the same pattern. 4 is the conclusion. That's paragraph 4. It's just a different way to look at it. Emphasize the major ties. So what? Evaluate. That's what it looks like in an outline form. You actually have an outline assignment for this. And what I'm going to ask you to fill out is the graphic organizer that I gave you. That's the table that has the blankets in it. Okay. All right. Oh, there's a clincher. Sorry. All right. So now let's talk about alternating paragraph organization. Come on. Let's come on up. There we go. So now here's your subjects again. But instead of flowing horizontally, these flow vertically. So first paragraph's the intro. Second paragraph's going to go this way. So you talk about so you're going to say, when considering purchasing a car, the overall cost of the car is important. That would be my topic sentence. Do I say anything about the Honda or the BMW? No. All you give in the topic sentence for these paragraphs is the criteria. You just focus on this in the TS. Then I can say a BMW on average for their smallest sedan costs blah, 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 blah. If you add on stuff, it could be more. See how you can expand that point about the price by bringing in add-ons, or if you get OnStar or whatever, okay? Then the third paragraph is going to talk only about the mileage. The miles per gallon that a driver gets from the car is important because gasoline is so expensive these days, all right? Then I talk about the average BMW, okay? But this is all in second paragraph. See how it goes down this way? This will all be in this paragraph. How did I do that without touching it? Did I get close enough? Hold on, let me go back. That was really strange. I have magical powers that I didn't know I had, okay? So remember, topic sentences on alternating only discuss the criteria, nothing else. But you talk about the BMW. So you can see, if I'm taking a test and I only have 50 minutes, and I've got 3 or 4 reasons why what started World Wars I and II, if I focus on the 3 causes, which might be political, economic, and geopolitical. Do y'all know what geopolitical is? The terrain of the land affects how wars start. It's a lot more easy to conquer a country that's flat that doesn't have mountains, right? So there might be reasons for that. I don't know. You have to talk to Mr. Hunt. That's more his field than my field. Okay? So that's alternating. So here's what it looks like when you're talking about the outline. So the introduction, there's no difference. Paragraph 1, I put par one, okay. The second paragraph's gonna be about price. I hate when you have paragraph 2. Paragraph 3 is the BMW, or it's mileage for the BMW and the Honda. Paragraph 4 is gonna be about the insurance, and paragraph 5 is gonna be your conclusion. So you're gonna see that the introduction and the conclusions don't change. What changes is what you do with the body paragraphs. So paragraph 4 and paragraph 5. And there's the clincher. So that's how those look. So what are the rules of thumb? This is important. Underline these things. Be sure to discuss both subjects equally in terms of coverage. I can't talk about the cost of the BMW and not talk about the cost of the Honda. So you can't say, oh, I'm gonna buy this gun, and you talk about whatever features of the gun are important. I don't know anything about guns. Why did I pick that? I don't know. But you can't ignore it in this gun versus gun A versus gun B. You have to deal with them equally. Even if you say, well, the Honda Civic doesn't have any extra features, so it's really not going to affect the price of the car. You have to say something. You can't ignore a criteria, because that's not treating them equally. So be sure to discuss in the same elements, and do not discuss one element. It's just repeating it, okay? And not do so for the other. And decide upon either block or alternating. Don't mix. If you do block, you cannot all of a sudden throw in, this is what the similarities are. You can't have a separate paragraph at the end of your paper before the conclusion that talks about similarities. That's wrong. You've already got you can only deal with the criteria and have a clear purpose to achieve. Okay, so using indicators. There's some great words in here to help you out. So the indicator words let you know if you're talking about how they're similar, how they're comparing, or how they're being contrasted. So here's some examples. To compare, you use also, as, in the same way, like, likewise, similarly, comparable, equally, in addition. You don't need one in every single sentence. Just, you do need some, though. To contrast, though, although, but, even though, however. On the other hand, you're going to see that a lot of those subordinated conjunctions and the conjunctive adverbs have them in there, okay? Yet, still, conversely, as opposed to, different from. Whereas, be careful with whereas, okay? So watch out for that. See how we do. Oh, Schwann's is coming by to see me between 3 and 8 today. Awesome. Okay. So, I'm going to discard my annotations so that I can do them on the next one. So I can surprise them with the ability to write on the PowerPoint. Let me show you a video. We're going to do that instead. So in week 5, gosh, time's flying, isn't it? When you only go to class twice a week, it's flying. Okay. This is a little Canadian guy. Here we go.
But Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
One of the most common types of academic essay you'll have to write is the comparison contrast essay, where you'll be asked to talk about the similarities and differences of two subjects. Now, it probably won't be as easy as comparing two cities. You'll probably have to compare something like two theories or two characters in two totally different novels. The most important thing to remember with comparison is to avoid the obvious. If you have two subjects that are very similar, of course, it's easy to focus on similarities, but it's probably more interesting to try to focus on the differences. Now, before we talk about the essay structure, it's important to mention that you should probably watch the video on basic essay structure first, okay? So the comparison contrast essay introduction is basically the same as the other essays we've discussed. The hook will engage the reader and introduce both subjects, which is very important. The background will give any essential information that the reader needs to understand the main point of the essay. And then the thesis statement will focus the comparison for the reader. Now, I'll mention something about thesis statements in a moment. The main difference between the comparison contrast essay and the other essays that we've discussed is that you have options with this kind of essay. There are really two different options that you can choose from. The first one is what we call the block method, which means you have two body paragraphs that are organized in this fashion. You can have a similarities differences essay, which means you have one paragraph that is entirely focused on the similarities between these two subjects, and one paragraph that is entirely focused on the differences between the two subjects, making sure that each paragraph has a clear topic sentence. Another form of the block essay is what you might call a subject-to-subject essay, which in one paragraph gives all the information about one subject. In the next paragraph, it focuses entirely on subject B. Okay, so that's one option. The second option, and in my opinion, the slightly more interesting of the two, is what we call the point-by-point comparison contrast essay, where instead of focusing only on similarities and differences, you choose two or more points of comparison. Now, if, for example, you were comparing two restaurants, certain points that you could use to compare them would be atmosphere, menu, service, and so on. So in the point-by-point body, each paragraph focuses on one point, either with the similarities or the differences. So for example, in that essay about restaurants, paragraph 1 would focus entirely on the atmosphere of both restaurants. Paragraph 2 could focus entirely on the service at both of those restaurants and how they're similar or different. After you've done that, of course, you have your conclusion, which is the same as pretty much all essays that we've talked about. You want to summarize your main points, and you want to end with a final statement to leave the reader with a lasting impression, perhaps a final opinion. Now, the most important part to keep in mind about the point-by-point essay is that whatever points you're discussing in your body have to be mentioned in the thesis statement. Now, with the block method, the thesis statement could be slightly more general, but if I were to write an essay about the restaurants and my points were atmosphere and service, I have to make sure to include the words atmosphere and service in my thesis statement. So that's basic comparison contrast.
So it's just reinforcing what it is, okay? So, and he gave you a viable topic. You can compare and contrast two restaurants. I don't have a problem. They, but I don't want you to compare and contrast Chick-fil-A and McDonald's. Let's avoid fast food restaurants because atmosphere is not really a focus in a fast food restaurant, is it? But if you're going to compare the Double Nickel and Kegel's, you're talking about two different steakhouses, two different kinds. Of course, if you can afford the Double Nickel, more power to you. I've only been there once, and I think I'm still recovering from paying for that, and it's been a long time, okay? Within your unit, you have, I'm not going to deal with that PDF. We're going to wait on that PDF, the long document that has some corrections that I gave you. We're going to wait on that one, okay? But I was going to show you, let's go into the unit. Let me show you. When you're in week 5, you're going to see, there's your checklist, what's going on. We're bringing in subject, verb, pronoun, antecedent agreement. That's our next big push-up, okay? But the handouts, here is the CNC graphic organizer outline. That'll be the table that I created for you that just has subject 1, subject 2, criteria 1, 2, and 3, all that, okay? You're going to have a grammar quiz, I think, at the end of this week. But in compare and contrast handouts, you're going to see everything is in there that you were given today, plus the video. So here's the assignment. The assignment basically says the essay should have at least 4 paragraphs. Let's make this bigger. Including an introduction with concluding with the thesis, body paragraphs using either the alternating or block method, and a conclusion. It should be double-spaced using a 12-point non-italicized font with the appropriate MLA heading. You just jumped 100 words on this particular assignment, okay? It's a 20% increase over the 500. And note that I discovered I had several people who were a little short on their narrative, so you got to make sure you hit that minimum word count. So there's the PowerPoint. there's the there's the organizer, I can't even speak today, outline, compare and contrast video link. Here's an organizational background. There's additional help. That's the big, long PDF you have. There's topic sentences for that PDF, but here is a sample student essay, a good student compare and contrast essay. So if you want to look at one, you can. And I think they're comparing, what is it? Coffee drinkers and energy drink consumers. So there's a possibility. All right, so you have a good one to look at. Let me get out of that. But you have the possible topic list. This is not all inclusive. I never will limit you on a topic list, except I'm going to say you can't compare and contrast red and white or red and orange, okay? We're not going to do colors. So I will cross them off as we go. I forgot to click on it so it would open. Okay, so let's go. Oh. I'm just blowing up the font. I like 36. Okay, Apple versus Microsoft. Okay, which is basically the same thing. How about if we say Apple and IBM? Okay. Let's see if I can draw yet, or if I still have done. Now, I don't know what I did to this, but I messed it up somehow. Okay. Coke versus Pepsi. I will not drink Pepsi. I do not like the taste of Pepsi. I just don't. Renaissance art versus Baroque art. Is anybody taking art appreciation online? Yeah, you could do that. You could pick two different periods, artistic periods, and write an essay about it. It would be perfectly acceptable. And I don't know, maybe you could get extra credit in your art appreciation class. It's a possibility. If you like history, antebellum era versus Reconstruction. Antebellum is before the Civil War. Reconstruction is after. That's why that's why they've kind of left, they don't say, it used to be Lady Antebellum, but that's perceived as a negative time by African Americans, so that's why they're going with Lady A. Childhood versus adulthood. It's amazing how many people want to write on this. And I'm sorry, if you're 18, you're still children, okay? You know what I'm saying? Trying to do childhood versus adulthood becomes an issue. Star Wars versus Star Trek. Hey, you've already got your organization and thesis statement set up for you. I don't care. You can write the one I gave you. You got it. But realize that I know both of them, so you have to be careful. But couldn't you change that to Marvel versus DC? That may be in here later on, too. I'll make sure it's my one. If you're a Marvel fan and a DC fan, or not a DC fan, biology versus chemistry, don't worry about the numbering system. I went and found topics and just loaded them all in, okay? Biology versus astrology versus astronomy. Astrology is where your life and what's going to happen is determined by the position of the stars, whereas astronomy is actually charting the planets and, where their movements and asteroids and all that. American government versus British government, or any world government, you could do that. All right, you can't do fruits versus vegetables, so I'm just going to do a big, that was wrong, Control Z, sorry. I'm just going to go with the big red. It would help not if I did. Here we go. Let's get in the right thing. So if it's highlighted in yellow right now, I don't want you to do it. You're not going to see it highlighted in yellow. Ego versus superego. I've had a student taking a psychology class who wrote that paper. Christianity versus Judaism or any world religion, that's a possibility. I've had somebody in summer school do that one. Republican versus Democrat. I am so tired of politics. I think they're all crooks. I'm sorry. I'm just very cynical right now. If you want to write it. Go for it. Monarchy versus presidency. You're in a government class. U.S. president versus the UK prime minister. Jazz versus classical music. Soccer versus football. That gets written. Can you see why? A lot of guys. Oh yeah, I know soccer. I watch it on TV. I play football, so I know everything about football. So everybody wants to tell me about, let's see, on that one they want to talk about the differences in the field and the differences in the rules and then the differences in the uniform. Don't spend a whole lot of time. You could talk equipment, but you know what I'm saying. We could all do soccer versus football, couldn't we? Boy, some interesting defeats yesterday in NFL football, weren't there? Everybody I would cheer for got lost yesterday. All right, New England colonies versus the middle colonies or southern colonies. Oh, yeah, if you have Mr. Hunt, maybe he'd like it, but, Cash versus credit cards. People like that one. People like that topic, okay? It's important, If you only spend cash, you're never going to have credit card debt. Let me tell you, credit card debt's a problem. All right, if you don't know who Sam Gamgee and Frodo Baggins are, then you know nothing about the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit or any of that. But I do, so be careful. I'm just trying to prepare you. I have certain knowledge in some areas, and I was looking for my Kleenex. Gandalf versus Dumbledore. I'm guessing most of you probably know who Dumbledore is. The headmaster at Hogwarts. Gandalf is the wizard in The Lord of the Rings. They're very similar, yet they're not exactly the same. Fred versus Shaggy. Come on, Scooby-Doo. Rap versus pop. Well, you guys like music. Or maybe, I'm sitting here thinking, could you do Asian boy bands versus American boy bands? There's always somebody that loves Korean bands. Somehow BTS works their way into a lot of things that I've had in the last year or so. I'm getting a friend, you're not a BTS fan? Are they in that phone commercial? Are they where they're on the subway or something? Okay. I don't recognize them. Yeah, they're in a commercial, okay. But, you could do that if you wanted to compare a couple of singing groups, like you could do NSYNC and BTS, but NSYNC is so low. You guys don't even know who NSYNC is, do you? Oh, gosh. Here we go. Articles of Confederation versus the U.S. Constitution. King Henry VIII versus King Louis XIV. This guy lost his head. He was married a bunch of times. Keeping on the time. Stocks versus bonds. I've had somebody write that paper. It was somebody who was majoring in economics, getting their it was probably a tech student who was taking that here because it's cheaper. And they wanted to write about it. Communism versus capitalism. Socialism versus capitalism. Nuclear power versus solar power. I don't know. You might could do wind power versus solar power. Mammals versus reptiles. Oh, come on. Let's don't do that. All right? Or you could do man versus dinosaurs and just, give me the plot of Jurassic Park, right? Somehow we managed. Oven versus microwave. I'm going to tell you, one of the worst papers I ever got was on oven versus microwave. It was a young man who had no clue what he was writing. He didn't pay any attention to any of the organizational stuff, and I got some really strange stuff. But I'll leave that one up there. Greek versus Roman mythology. Very, very similar. The Romans were great thieves, so they stole a lot of stuff, okay? But they changed it. And it's really funny because I'm actually rereading Rick Riordan's books about the Greek demigods and the Roman demigods coming together. I read constantly, so. Chinese versus Japanese. I don't necessarily, we're thinking languages here. Comedy versus drama. Who would much rather watch comedy? I would. I don't like, you guys like dramas? Do you know I've never seen a Nicholas Sparks book made into a movie? Never seen one. No, they're always tearjerkers. The Fault in Our Stars. Somebody's going to die. I don't like to cry. Renting versus owning. This is another good paper that I get from people. Renting versus owning. Mozart versus Beethoven. Have you done anything about, well, is anybody doing music appreciation? Okay. You could do that, could you? Yeah, she's saying, no way. Online versus traditional education. Guess what? This is not, what we're doing right here, ITV is not traditional education. This is considered a hybrid class because of the component that you have to do on the computer on the weekends. But online versus traditional, we all got stuck with online versus traditional education a couple of years ago. So you could talk about what are the advantages, think of advantages and disadvantages, and then that would be your points of comparison. That's a good paper to write. The North versus the South Pole, well, they have a lot of snow and ice, okay. But you'd have to look at the animals, the overall climate. I don't know. Watercolor versus oil. 1984 versus Fahrenheit 451, they're both about the future. 1984 was not written, it was written like in the 20s, so I don't know why they picked that. Fahrenheit 451 is where they burn all the books, and people have memorized the books so that the literature is not lost. Emily Dickinson versus Samuel Taylor Coleridge. No, don't even know, okay. Everybody knows Emily Dickinson. you know, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Okay, it's poetry, American poetry versus British. W.E.B. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington. Okay, airplanes versus helicopters. That somebody wrote that. I got that. One of my probably my military guys like to write those kind of things. Hitler versus Napoleon. Both dictators, both emperors. Roman Empire versus British. Paper versus plastic. Italy versus Spain sounds like a bad soccer match, right? Baseball versus cricket or softball. Okay, don't write cricket, but if you're going to write baseball versus softball, realize that I know baseball. I haven't played softball in a while, but the rules are slightly different, but not, you know, you can watch a game and figure it out. Jefferson versus Adams. I threw in Hamilton versus Burr, because a lot of us have seen Hamilton, if nothing else, on TV. Did y'all watch? Y'all need to watch the televised version of the actual original performances of it. It's just amazing. I'm not gonna waste money. Okay, I can sing some of the songs, but not very well. All right, Thoroughbreds versus Clydesdales. There's somebody who'll want to write a paper about horses. Spiders versus Scorpions sounds like West Side Story. We got the Jets versus the Sharks, right? Northern Hemisphere versus Southern Hemisphere. Okay, anybody into LD? Hobbes versus Locke. Those are philosophers. I can see you're going to sleep as I speak. Friends versus family. That looks like an easy one, but it's not. Modern dance versus ballroom dancing. Okay. Yeah. All right. American Idol versus The Voice. They're both back on. It was interesting because I've had this on here a while, and you know, American Idol went off for 3 or 4 years. Or you could do, what's the Masked Singer versus, I don't know, there's enough, they're both about singing competitions, but the Masked Singer or the new one they've got where they're avatars, you know, there's a little bit of difference in there, so which appeals to you more? You know, to try to figure out who's singing, you know what I'm saying? Or find a new singer. Reality TV versus sitcoms. All right, Star Trek, Picard versus Kirk. William Shatner, James T. Kirk, the original one, is going to be going out into space. He's 90 years old. Books versus movies. People like to write that. Magazines versus comic books. Email versus letters. I don't know about you guys, but email's so much easier. I have a couple of old friends, old gentleman friends. My next door neighbor, for 33 years, moved to be next to his family in Kentucky. And so every once in a while, I'll write him a letter. And then I have another old friend from church.
Your conference is scheduled to end in 2 minutes.
Coffee versus an energy drink. We saw that's the sample essay. Profit versus nonprofit. High school versus college. You guys the SPC students have a better view of what college is. I'm sorry, the kids at the high school, you're taking dual credit. It's not exactly the same. Chamberlain versus Churchill. Offense versus defense. Okay, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, there's offense and defense, yeah. Okay. Jordan versus Bryant, or any two comparable athletes. You got to be careful not to use a lot of statistics. We got just about a minute left. Harry versus Draco. Come on. You know who that is. Poetry versus prose. None of you are going to pick poetry, are you? Fiction versus nonfiction. Vampires versus werewolves. There we go. Twilight. Thank heavens Twilight's in the past now. This used to be a really popular topic because of Twilight. And they give me all the wrong information about vampires. Vampires and werewolves. Vampires cannot go out in the daylight, and werewolves can't just change whenever they want to. That's changing the mythos. Summer versus winter. You can do seasons, and we'll talk about that later on. Here's one, go on vacation or versus a staycation versus a vacation. Okay, so start thinking about what you want to write. If you didn't get your narrative in, you need to get it turned in today. After today, I will count it later. Most of you have it in. I'm just going to say that I don't know what they did, but things were shut down on Sunday. So, and if you missed something, I got an email from somebody telling me that they were sorry they couldn't take the grammar test.
Your conference is now over.
Because they were in the
Goodbye.
homecoming court, and they had to get ready all day long, and they had to get ready for the pep rally, and I was like, I'm sorry. That's not an excuse for not doing your work in my class. If I'm going, makeups will be the last week before finals.